This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
Follow up on Ms. Kwan, what she was just saying.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks to the witness panel for joining us this morning and providing us with your expertise. Very nice to see you, Mr. Chu, here today, former colleague of ours. And thanks for making the trip. It's quite early back home in BC for you, so happy to see you here. I'd like to start with a question for you, Mr. Junoketsu. Do you have evidence of interference or interference attempts, or evidence that Canadian governments have been informed of these activities?
Yes, but I don't have them with me since I was with CSIS. It's remained with CSIS.
Okay. So you don't have any information that you'd be able to transmit to the committee for its review?
Other than the normal briefing has been provided at various time through the last 30 years, all the senior command or the chain of command has spoken to various governments at one point or another. No, I don't have it. It was regular briefing given according to the seriousness of what we had discovered at that period of time.
Do you know how many federal ridings have been targeted by the communist regime in Beijing?
Through the last 30 years, or the recent?
I'm interested in both numbers, actually.
Well, through the years, we have seen similar riding constantly being targeted, particularly where there was a domination or a great number, I should say, of Chinese-Canadian residents. These were the hunting ground of the consular office. The work is done by consular officers most of the time, and like I said, we have a certain number, but they were all the time the same ones targeted. And they would fluctuate through time when a specific MP or candidates would present itself newly against the Chinese government, when it was not usual to have aggressions or resistance coming from that riding. But if somebody became vocal, then suddenly they would deploy some effort. But it was fairly stable throughout the entire Canada.
Would you believe it to be productive for you to furnish this committee with a list in writing of those ridings?
I could try to put it together.
Okay, thank you. Are you familiar with the 2022 case of Christine Lee in the United Kingdom? She was the subject of an alert by MI5?
No, I'm not.
Okay, I see Mr. Stanton is nodding. Sir, are you familiar with that case?
Yeah, very much. I mean, I read it. I was following it quite closely, so I read all the media on it.
So you're aware that House of Commons Speaker Hoyle issued an alert to members of Parliament to warn of interaction with Miss Lee?
Yeah.
Similarly, a similar situation, are you aware of an alert that was issued by the Speaker as the result of information by MI5 concerning Russian influence attempts the year prior?
If I'm thinking about the same one, there was a case in Britain, and I think MI5 was involved, but I think from what I've read in the media, it's of questionable accuracy whether this is some, I think, a British subject who's claimed that he reported to MI5 and they didn't take seriously what he was saying?
No, the case that I'm referring to was influence activities targeting 100 members of the UK House by Russian state actors looking to color their perspective of activities of the government of Ukraine. But we'll stick with the situation that you're familiar with.
Okay.
And that's of Miss Lee. So this issue was raised by MI5, brought to the Speaker of the House, and then members were warned. Why do you think that that's not a practice that's employed here in Canada? We've heard testimony here this morning already that there are state actors working at all levels of government in all political parties, and I think that is surprising. That everyone would say, oh, it must be in another party, it must have been another government, and members couldn't be blamed for that because we have an intelligence service that's never told us otherwise. So,
Yeah.
so why don't we have that process in place here? And if you could keep your remarks pretty tight, I'll try and get to the other two speakers.
I'll be real brief. I think that particular case in Britain was so egregious that they had intelligence that the money that was coming from the United Front Work Department in the PRC through this British citizen going right into an MP's campaign fund. And I think there was probably a lot more going on, but it wasn't hitting any legal thresholds. So the best the British could do was send out this all points bulletin to everybody, identifying her, basically saying, stay away, stay clear. She's a foreign influence actor. Now, I wouldn't say the allegations we have in Canada, based on what looks to be pretty sketchy information coming from the media, dribs and drabs, that the Canadian government would issue something like that. That's just my opinion. But I think the British case was so blatant, it provoked that.
So I have several questions, noting that I only have 5 minutes. A few quick yes or no, if I could, from you, Mr. Junoketsu. Is it your belief that the current Prime Minister knew about foreign interference, not influence attempts in the 2019 and 2021 federal elections?
Well, I wouldn't be able to say if Mr. Trudeau was informed. I can only go with the allegation that were demonstrated presented. Sorry,
based on your, pardon me for interrupting. Based on your experience over the last 30 years, would it be your belief that he would have been briefed on it?
Yes.
Do you believe that sufficient action, or do you believe that sufficient action was taken in response to it by the government?
Nope.
Do you believe that, based on media reports and on your experience, that the current government benefited in any way from interference attempts in the 2019 or 2021 elections?
Potentially.
We know that the CCP undertook a campaign to gain influence with Mr. Trudeau through clandestine funding of his family foundation, the Trudeau Foundation. Do you believe that that campaign has been effective?
Yes.
Mr. Stanton, thank you, sir. Mr. Stanton, in June of 2017, it's been reported that the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff requested a brief on foreign interference in Canadian politics, and that briefing said that there's a substantial... Are you familiar with this, sir?
Not really.
You're not familiar with the reporting of this?
No.
Any of the panelists familiar with the reporting of the 2017 request for a brief by Ms. Telford on foreign interference in elections?
Nope.
Okay. Moving on. How would the Prime Minister, based on your experience in the security apparatus, how would a Prime Minister or their staff be briefed on foreign interference issues by CSIS? Well, specifically, like who from CSIS typically, like what level of individual would deliver that briefing to a Prime Minister?
Sorry, who are you asking?
Anyone who has an answer.
I don't have an answer from my experience of what particular vehicles of briefing or personnel. I know that, CSIS provides a whole range of intelligence products, from assessment to raw. You'll be looking at the Privy Council office, you'll be looking at various departments.
Okay.
So how that would make its way to the Prime Minister or the Prime Minister's National Security Advisor, I really have no insight.
Okay. Do you believe that the scientists, Mr. Stanton, are you familiar with the case of the Winnipeg lab?
Yeah.
And that there were, that on CSIS's information, 2 scientists were fired or removed from their employment there?
Yes, I'm aware, yeah.
Do you believe that they were CCP agents?
Not necessarily. Here's what I believe, based on the media reports. I've been following it. The service provided advice in terms of a clearance, whether it's a clearance renewal or whether it's a clearance, which goes to the
Sure.
deputy head of the department, and it's their decision what to do. It's not CSIS' decision. They simply say, we would recommend perhaps not a renewal. And then I think these two individuals basically returned to mainland China.
So they're not still in, your belief is that they're not still in Canada?
Well, from what I've read in the media, it looks like no one's around, and I think the fact no charges have been laid might reflect that. But I look at this and I see, okay, there was an issue there. Perhaps proprietary information was sent back to China. Who knows? It probably doesn't meet the threshold of espionage.
Okay. I just have about 30 seconds left.
Okay.
So, in my previous round of questions, I talked about this issue of MI5 and the FBI making a public announcement with respect to that foreign agent acting in the UK. So those are two of our Five Eyes partners who are publicly communicating on issues of foreign influence and foreign interference. Yet it's radio silence, and then we're left to question whether or not we have CSIS agents who are leaking because we don't have anyone from CSIS who's actually speaking to the real issues that we all know for a fact are happening and being perpetrated on this country by state actors from around the world, including from Beijing. How do we fix that?
And here's my answer.
It's got to be real quick.
It'll be really quick. In those cases, those Allied releases, it was probably based on very convincing intelligence, probably corroborated intelligence, so they did the release. All we're getting through the media, all due respect, is allegations. So why the Canadian government wouldn't make these warnings and send emails to everybody, it may be because there just wasn't meeting that threshold of solid, reliable intelligence that MPs need to be advised.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Again, thanks everyone for providing us with your experience and perspectives today. We've been pretty clear. We've been crystal clear that we think that having a public inquiry, an open and transparent mechanism, is the best way to remove this from the political sphere and provide openness to Canadians. I think there's definitely a place for the type of transparency, like in the examples I mentioned from the UK, when there's incidents that give rise to that. What would the benefit be of having an open, transparent, public inquiry on foreign interference in our elections? Mr. Junot-Katsu.
The only way the inquiry would be beneficial is if we make sure that it doesn't turn into a partisanship, low fight in a ring fight. If we are capable, just like my colleague Arthur has mentioned, that we are capable to bring more transparency, it will bring greater awareness, greater warning to the population, and demonstrate the sizable threat that we are currently facing. And eventually, hopefully, give the adjustment and the power to the intelligence community to be capable to be much more efficient and much more capable to warn on due time our leaders of all parties.
Okay.